If you're hankering for a 1000cc sports tourer from the old school mould, bikes to choose from are becoming increasingly thin on the ground. The advent of the adventure bike has forced many manufacturers to retuning and reworking their tall off-road machines, dialing in some sporty dynamics and performance in the process. But that doesn't mean there aren't options out there if you want your bike to be more sports than sports tourer. Two bikes that immediately spring to mind are the Suzuki GSX-S1000F and the Kawasaki Ninja 1000SX. Gazing at the spec sheet for each machine, it becomes clear that these two bikes are extremely well matched. Both make around 140 horsepower, both produce around 80 foot-pounds of torque, both cost about £11,000. But what are they actually like out on the road? If there's one thing that sets the two bikes apart first and foremost, it's Suzuki's claim that their bike, the GSX-S1000F, isn't a sports touring motorcycle. They claim simply that this is a sports bike that just happens to be comfortable to ride. And it's because of this claim Suzuki immediately falls a point behind the Ninja 1000 in this test, as you can't purchase the bike with official hard luggage or panniers. The only options that you have are a very small tail pack and a tank bag, although some aftermarket options do apply. The Kawasaki, on the other hand, can be bought with Kawasaki lockable and removable hard panniers, or alternatively, but not at the same time, a top box. Because the pannier setup is bespoke for this bike, the Kawasaki's mounting system is flush fitting, and when the panniers are removed from the bike, it's barely noticeable that they're even there. As I mentioned earlier, the engine specs for these two machines are very evenly matched, and the resemblance continues when you ride them on the road. The GSX-S1000F engine has tons of low-down torque and mid-range. It pulls sharply from 3000 RPM in fifth and gathers strength as the revs climb. That's until you hit 9000 RPM, where there's a sports bike-like top-end surge and a rush as the bike sprints to its red line. Peak power is 143.5 bhp at 10,000 RPM, which isn't bad for a unit that can trace its roots back to the K5 GSX-R 1000 sports bike. Nestled beneath the sleek-looking new bodywork of the Ninja 1000 is a 1034cc four-cylinder engine. It too has been around for a while and can trace its roots back as far as the 2003 version of the first modern-day Z1000. It's got masses of low-down grunt, with 80 foot-pound peaking at 7,500 RPM, although you seem to have the same amount of shove from tick over as you do when you're in the sweet spot. The bike will easily pull away from the lights in third gear without too much fuss. Unlike the Suzuki, the Ninja 1000 seems to have a more linear spread of torque in the mid and the bottom end of the rev range, without the rush to the red line that you get from the Suzuki. But maybe that was the sportiness that Suzuki were talking about. The suspension for both machines is equally matched, with the Kawasaki wearing decent spec upside down forks with rebound damping adjustability and a rear shock with a remote preload adjuster. The Suzuki is blessed with fully adjustable KYB forks and a rear shock that has preload and rebound damping adjustability. Comparing the two is tricky, as it kind of comes down to what you want from the bike, because the Suzuki is the far sportier of the two. That's thanks mostly to it borrowing some of its chassis components from the GSX-R 1000 sports bike. The Kawasaki is a more refined ride on the road and lends itself much better to touring two-up and for proper distance work. On the comfort front, it also looks like the Kawasaki might have the win over the Suzuki, as it is roomier and more neutral than that bike. The Suzuki is slightly cramped on the upper body and in the legroom department, and that's kind of all in the quest for the ground clearance that they need to make it as sporty as they want. And while we're talking about comfort, you only have to take one look at the pillion seat on the GSX-S and it will have your pillion partner reaching for the car keys. It's tiny. So, to sum up, as a comfortable sports bike, yes, the Suzuki does succeed, but that is not really what folk will use it for, is it? Trying to hide a sports tour in a sports bike category simply because the subframe won't take two people's weight and panniers and luggage is a little bit of a cop-out if you ask me. For me, in this test, the Kawasaki edges it as a true, genuine all-rounder. that's been properly thought out and can tick a number of boxes from track days to touring. It is a bike that can genuinely do it all. So there you have it, that's our verdict. But what bikes would you like us to compare? Let us know in the comments below and we'll see what we can do.